Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're moving along here in my Wes Anderson series. Yes, it's no longer John Ford, and I'll deal with that trauma for a while after dealing with that for a year and a half. But very excited to be tackling one of, I feel like, the films that really got attention from Wes Anderson, which is Rushmore. But introducing my three guests. We have Kevin, who is a good friend of mine and a member of my movie club. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We have Nash, fellow SiftPop contributor. Nash, thank you so much for coming on.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
And Robert, who is our one of our editors for SiftPop and one of our fearless leaders. Robert, thank you so much for coming on.
Hello.
And as I mentioned, our feature film for this week is Rushmore. But for those who haven't tuned in before, we have three segments. So we're going to be starting off with coming attractions for the weekend of January 17th. Yep, F you, it's January. But honestly, there's a whole bunch of holdovers from December because I feel like this January is like extra bad for like holding over films for award season that just didn't
Yeah.
get released this that got released in
Yep.
December. But we'll get to that and then Rushmore and then have some recommendations for you. But throwing out the two actual new wide releases this weekend are One of Them Days, a new comedy, and Wolfman. So the film about my life, just kidding. The new remake of the Universal horror film, and also have quite a few re-releases or wide releases. But let's start with you, Kevin. Which film are you most excited for?
I'm going to say one of them days because I've seen the trailer for that one and I'm not sure about the others.
That is a fair point. Nash, Robert, are either of you excited for One of Them Days?
I have seen the trailer many times now because I often go to the movies, as all of us do. And it's made me not excited for it. So there's my answer.
It was a meh
Uh,
trailer.
yeah, I mean it looks entertaining. I like who's involved with it. It could be a good, fun January movie, I guess.
I am cheating, but as of now, I have seen it.
Hmm.
And it was legitimately hilarious. So would recommend. And
Yeah,
has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now as
Does
of the
it?
embargo lifting today. So
sounds like Robert's just a hater. Imagine that.
we're not going to pick on Robert today. So moving
Not
on,
today, right? Yeah.
not today. Nash, which one are you most excited for?
I think I'm gonna choose I'm Still Here, the Portuguese film that's being released wide, I believe. That falls into your criteria, I think. I don't like. I've heard more about it, kind of the behind the scenes stuff in terms of the attempted boycotting, and then obviously the actress who is getting a lot of attention. What is her name? Sorry, hold on,
Fernanda Torres.
Fernanda Torres. Yeah, it just. I mean, I've heard amazing things about it. I've heard it's one of the best international films of the year. So I don't really know a ton about it. I don't think I've seen a trailer or anything, but it just seems like my language.
I was aware it was coming out, but like I didn't really know much about it until it won a Golden Globe.
Yeah.
Fernanda
You haven't
Torres
seen it
winning
yet?
it. Uh I did see it a couple of
Okay.
weeks ago. So it is a very powerful film and she is great in it. For sure. But Robert, Kevin, has this film been on either of your radars?
Oh, you're on mute.
I don't think it has, no.
Mhm. How about you, Robert?
Yeah, there are just so many movies, and in my eyes, there's only one Shane Kanto, and it is not me.
Preach.
I was gonna say I can attest to how many goddamn movies come out in a year.
How
And
many John Ford movies, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even counting those, and I watched 80 of them over the course of a year and a half. Um, it's it's definitely going to be one of those films I feel like people are going to check out if it winds up getting nominated for Best International Film at the Oscars. I have a strong feeling it will at this point, especially since at least it's getting some attention, but we
Oh,
shall
it's not
see.
Portuguese. It's Brazilian. I'm being so silly. I said Portuguese earlier, and I was
Well, it's
wrong.
in Portuguese.
You said
Uh,
it was your language, Nash.
No, well, hold on. You're right. I did say
Robert
that.
nailed it. Now, Robert, what film that definitely didn't release before this
Uh-huh.
weekend because nobody has seen it are you most excited for?
Yeah, this film definitely didn't have a limited release on July 12th or expand on August 2nd, only to leave theaters and come back this coming weekend. It's Sing Sing, yeah. I've been hearing about it from people who are able to see movies for obviously months now. And I just noticed today it is coming to my local AMC, which I was surprised by. I thought I was going to have to take a little bit more of a drive to see it than to the close AMC, but thankfully I'm going to finally get to see it. I don't have much to say other than, I've heard high praise about it. Coleman Domingo is Coleman Domingo, so I'm just
Hmm.
super pumped to finally see it. Um, yeah, though based on what Kevin was saying, I might actually cancel my ticket for Sing Sing and go see one of them days instead. So, we'll see.
There you go. Um, Kevin, was Sing Sing on your radar?
I'm not sure I've even heard of it.
There you go. How about you, Nash?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, ever since, I was one of the people that did know it was released. I just didn't catch it in time. Then I was been really
It
pissed for the
lasted
bill.
like a week
Yeah.
in
And then
theaters,
it's
I
been
feel like.
impossible to see for the last 6 months or whatever. So
This is the
I'm
first
also
time it's
excited.
come near me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I luckily got invited to a press screening for it back in the summer on a Saturday afternoon in Center City, Philadelphia. And what was really cool because they actually had a Q&A with members of the Philadelphia Arts and Prison programs. So that was a really cool experience getting to see that. But I've gotten a chance to see it a second time because I pay my yearly subscription to Film Independent, so it's in the screening room because it's up for the Independent Spirit Awards. So I got to rewatch it with friends of the show, Joe and Matt, because we had plans to go on an adventure, and then they're like, "You have all these movies in the screening room." I'm like, "Yes, I do." And so they came over and just watch movies. So it's definitely worth it. And Coleman Domingo, you would think he would be a shoe-in for a nomination for Best Actor, but it seems like A24 is not exactly putting their energy into this film for award season because they're putting it all in The Brutalist.
Da da
But
da da.
it is a great score. And also in the closed captioning on my TV while I was watching it kept saying triumphant score.
Mm.
I'm like, or triumphant music. I'm like, it is. So there you go. But yeah, so as of us recording, well, my most anticipated film for this week is actually Wolfman, because I'm a huge fan of The Invisible Man that Lee Winnell did for Blumhouse, modernizing it. And I was super excited for this adaptation of The Wolfman. Not because I am one, because maybe I am, but because I liked who's involved in everything, and both this and One of Them Days had their embargoes lift today. So One of Them Days is getting a lot of really positive reviews. And I'm kind of disappointed by the reviews for Wolfman because, not going to lie, I saw it last night and I was really impressed by it.
Mm.
So um, we'll have to see how things go this weekend. Will all these movies be able to beat Den of Thieves 2 in its second weekend at the box office? Or will they be able to beat Mufasa that just keeps trugging along and Sonic? But we shall see. But those are our coming attractions. But we're here to talk about Rushmore from Wes Anderson. And I have a little bit of backstory here, so let's go through some of that. So, this film, released in 1998, was written by Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson, starring Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, and Olivia Williams. The soundtrack focused mostly on British invasion music of the 60s, which you can tell Wes Anderson really loves the Rolling Stones. This was shot in 50 days in Houston, Texas. really launched Jason Schwartzman's career and delivered a second career for Bill Murray, who honestly his career was kind of floundering at that point with some low points in the mid 90s. This did get some attention at the Independent Spirit Awards. Wes Anderson did win and was up for Best Director there, and Bill Murray for Best Supporting Actor. And Bill Murray actually got nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor for this film as well. In 2016, this was preserved in the National Film Registry for the Library of Congress. A lot of the influence and tone and visuals were specifically based off of Roald Dahl novels, which nobody's surprised
No.
when Wes Anderson wound up adapting not only Fantastic Mr. Fox, then they made four short films for Netflix that weren't supposed to be short films, all based off of Roald Dahl books. So
But they won him an Oscar.
they did win him an
Did indeed.
Oscar. He didn't even show up. Um, Most of the plot points were actually based off of Owen Wilson's life, um, which is interesting. We're gonna
Wow.
get in. I get wow. We're gonna get into a couple details. This was originally a New Line Cinema production, but was auctioned off to Disney because this just screams Disney. But then, of course, they released it with Touchstone, so nobody knew it was Disney. Um, Mr. Bloom was written for Bill Murray, and he loved it so much that he worked for scale and approximately like $9,000. So obviously, he really wanted to be in this film. Anderson storyboarded everything, but did allow Bill Murray to do, his Bill Murray thing, adding some little improv and such. Macaulay Culkin was considered for the Max role, along with 1,800 other people that they auditioned for this role. So this is a long casting. And the film almost got scrapped because Wes Anderson felt like he couldn't find somebody to actually play Max until the casting director actually met Jason Schwartzman at his cousin Sofia Coppola's party. So that wound
He's a
up
real
working out.
nobody at that time.
Just casually just the son of Talia Shire and one of the Coppola clan. So there you go. Anderson originally wanted Noah Taylor as Max, who was going to be more of like a young Mick Jagger type, which is interesting because Noah Taylor wound up being in Life Aquatic, which I'll talk about in a couple episodes. Anderson saw Schwartzman as more of a Dustin Hoffman type and went in that direction based off of like The Graduate and that kind of vibe. Bill Murray helped the crew and paid for the helicopter shot because they couldn't afford it and Disney wasn't going to let them shoot it, and Bill Murray paid for it out of pocket. So interesting. Anderson cited Chinatown, The Graduate, and Harold and Maude as the main influences filmically for this. Margaret Yang was originally going to have a wooden finger, but that was then recycled in the script for the Royal Tenenbaums. So, interesting little tidbit there. The opening montage was influenced by French New Wave filmmaking, and Disney fought every step of the way and did not want them to include that at the beginning because it was going to cost too much money. Um, this debuted at the Toronto Film Festival and Telluride. It made $19 million dollars on a $10 million budget. Wasn't a huge financial success, but did get Wes Anderson a lot of attention and really put his career on the map. After all that lovely backstory, does anybody have any comments or anything they wanted to say about that?
I think it's interesting that Bill Murray financed part of the production, like you mentioned, because his character is financing Max during the movie.
It
That's true.
was basically just him in real life. He's just like, I really want to make this project. So there you go. So good guy Bill Murray said not a lot of people
Not
have
only,
heard
I was going to
of
say,
it.
I was kind of
So,
shocked when you said that because he notoriously has a very different reputation. So good on him for doing at least one good thing.
apparently he really likes Wes Anderson. So
And Sofia Coppola. I'm surprised he never wasn't in Megalopolis or something. He's kind of around the Coppola Schwartzman clan fairly often.
I guess Francis Ford Coppola needed to sell a couple more wine. orchards to afford Bill Murray to get put into the
Mm.
movie too.
He wasn't working for scale anymore.
Which also an interesting point is that the whole apparently the whole falling in love with an older woman was Owen Wilson's friend, or Owen Wilson being in love with an older woman while he was in boarding school in
Mm.
Houston, Texas. So there's a lot of Max in apparently Owen Wilson. So that is a very interesting thing. But let's get started. So, Kevin, what were some of your general thoughts on Rushmore?
So this one surprised me. I didn't even know what this was about going into it. I think this is the fourth or fifth Wes Anderson film I've seen. I know I've seen Fantastic Mr. Fox. I don't know if I saw Royal Tenenbaums. I saw Life Aquatic um, and Grand Budapest Hotel. I think this might be my favorite of his filmography so far that I've seen. I really liked the character of Max. He really got into a lot of mischief in this movie. And
Say the
Jason
least.
Schwartzman surprised me. Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of pranks, right? Jason Schwartzman was pretty young when this was filmed, right?
Hmm.
Did you say this was his film debut?
Yes, I think he was
17.
like 17, 18, somewhere around there.
Okay. Yeah, he looks really young in this movie, but he played that role really well. A little bit of a manipulative character, but
Little
he
bit.
was really fun to watch on screen. The whole supporting cast was great. I particularly liked the guy who played Max's dad. I
Mhm.
thought that was a good character and a nice little contrast to Max. Um, it was delightful.
He's a
The
fun character actor who's popped up in Seymour Cassell popped up in
Okay.
at least a handful of Wes Anderson's first couple of films. He was I just rewatched Life Aquatic this morning and Esteban
Oh, was he in
and
that?
yeah, he's his friend that gets, eaten by a shark.
Oh, okay. It's
So
been too long since I've seen that.
you only see it him very briefly. But
Yeah.
Nash, what were some of your general thoughts on the film?
Yeah, I mean, much like Kevin, I kind of came to it from a place of like I knew I'd heard about it. A lot of people cite it as kind of the breakout Wes Anderson. And then I was reading a lot of people who like aren't huge Wes Anderson fans, like modern Wes Anderson fans, will cite this as their favorite. So it's like I knew all that going in. And I had a absolutely great time with it. I don't think it's among my favorite of the Wes Anderson movies I've seen, but that's kind of like the bar is really high, and so he made a really good movie. And you know, there's elements of it that like feel distinctly 90s in a way that are both in ways that are both good and bad. More good than bad. Yeah, I mean, I watched it a couple nights ago. I've been thinking about it all day long ever since. So I'm a big fan, huge fan. And also, Jason Schwartzman has been incredible since he was a child. Like he's one of our best actors working today. But my goodness, for this to be a debut performance alongside Bill Murray and he's holding his own is jaw dropping. TBH,
I just looked it up. He was 17 when this was filmed. He turned 18 4 months after it wrapped.
There we
nuts.
go. How about you, Robert?
I'll just start off with the Jason Schwartzman comments since that's where we're at. It's funny, I watched Between the Temples the night before I watched
Nice.
Rushmore. Um, Honestly, I forgot that I needed to watch Rushmore until I was watching that. I was like, oh wait, why is Jason Schwartzman like ringing some bells? And then I was like, oh yeah, I gotta watch Rushmore. And I'd watched Queer a couple weeks earlier, so I'm kind of on
Mhm.
a little Jason Schwartzman run, and I love this guy so much. He's just so good in this movie specifically, of course, just in general. But yeah, I love everything about his performance. As for the movie as a whole, it's probably my favorite of like the early Wes Anderson stuff. Um, the
Where's your cutoff? Yeah, I was just
I was gonna say the pre like which one come here? I have it up right here.
Royal
Uh
Tenenbaums is after this, and then Life Aquatic.
yeah, so if I put like Darjeeling right at the cusp. Um, that Darjeeling is my favorite overall, so Rushmore is my favorite that comes before it. I have the Criterion poster right here. It like came in the Criterion edition of it, so that's been up there for a while. Yeah, it's just a really good movie overall. It's like all of Wes Anderson's movies. It's like got this melancholy beneath it, but also it's life affirming by the end. It's not so um dollhouse the way that he's become, even though I'll be on in a few weeks to defend the dollhouseness, but I appreciate it for what it is at this time in his career, because it really does make the emotions and the characters and the story pop in a way that it perhaps doesn't these days. Um, and yeah, like everyone's been saying, great performances all around, great filmmaking. Wes Anderson is genuinely like a top two or three director for me.
He's also one of my favorite directors, which is why I specifically hand chose him
Yeah.
as the next director to come after uh 80 Weeks of John Ford. And as I'm sitting here, I have a Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums, and Life Aquatic posters all lined up on my wall because I am a huge Wes Anderson fan. And I mm, like my favorite ones are like Grand Budapest Hotel and Moonrise Kingdom. This one I feel like in many ways feels like his most like personal kind of film, and also feeling like it's before he does. I feel like there is you have Fantastic Mr. Fox on where things get really he goes full blown into like that like very artistic art house kind of vibe that he's been slowly really diving into. And like this has those elements to it, but also feels grounded as well in many ways. And just to keep going on the Jason Schwartzman conversation, he's such a talented actor. And even in films or shows where I'm just like, I don't know if I'm gonna buy him. Like he was a mobster in Fargo season what was that, season 4? And I'm just like, really? But like he comes to play in every single performance he has, and he commits so much to this, and he's insanely charismatic. But also, you get all the neuroticism, you get all the nervousness, overconfidence, and he's both putting off a mature vibe, but also extremely immature because he really doesn't understand the world around him. And Jason
Yeah.
Schwartzman delivers that so perfectly. And this is like Bill Murray at Bill Murray's most deadpan, just going for it. And this is such a strange time with Olivia Williams as an actor playing grieving widows, between this and The Sixth Sense. Um, which I'm sorry if that spoiled anything for anybody, you
That's what
know.
I remember her from. I was trying to remember it.
Yeah.
All I could think
And
of was that she played the lady who hooked up with Joey on Friends.
Oh yeah.
he was also most recently in Dune Prophecy on Max, on HBO as well.
She's
Um,
also a teacher who like maybe gets too close and personal with a student in an education. So it's like there's a lot of parallels with other
yeah.
characters.
She has some vibes specifically,
Yeah.
and I love her in this. I think she's fantastic, and you can feel the pain that's there, that's lingering from her losing her husband. You see like the little sparks of potential joy when she first starts interacting with Herman before you know all that's just killed because he's a giant child too. So, but it just this has a really great cast, and it's interesting dealing with like this storyline with like you have this high school kid who's in love with his teacher and is unrelenting in trying to it's like I think one of the funniest moments for me in this movie is when she just straight just like drops him because it's like he's trying to force himself on her and he's a kid and she's just like I'm an adult and just throws him into the boxes and he like awkwardly gets up and it's just like that's where the whole facade of him trying to act like an adult just disappears. It's like, yeah, this kid's a kid,
Hmm.
who also has a really great talent for making the most out of like what the hell was his budgets or his budgets for these plays that he did. Serpico and um kind of platoonish play that he did at the end of this, which that's wild. The actual like production design at the end of this movie for that play is ridiculous. I'm just like, even for the budget that they had for this movie to make this, I was really
Yeah.
impressed with what they did with that. So,
Bloom
but
had
I,
to have bankrolled that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, right?
Yeah,
like
he's
Bill
at
Murray
least
had
worth
to
$10
just,
million. Dollars. Yeah.
Right.
Disney's like, does he really need to have like this super realistic, like detailed play about Vietnam? Yes. Wes Anderson there in his like corduroys just being like, yes, at a meeting with Disney. But I guess what were some of the other elements of the film that really stood out to everybody?
Well, I like that you mentioned Rosemary's role in the movie because that was a pretty compelling plot because we're kind of seeing it from seeing the whole movie through Max's eyes. But the way she performs, you can still see how everything's affecting her and get glimpses into her point of view. Like, this has got to be a really, really difficult situation for a teacher to have to be navigating when you've got a kid obsessed with you, like Max is throughout this movie. Um, I don't know if she necessarily handled everything 100% as well as she could have, um, but it was interesting because both the two male main characters, so we've got Max and Herman. Uh, they're both a little immature. Everybody's dealing with a loss of some kind in this movie. Max lost his mom. Rosemary lost her husband, and Herman kind of lost the spark in his marriage. And they're all dealing with that in a whole bunch of different ways. And she seems to be taking the brunt of all the damage that goes down in the movie. I thought that was interesting.
Like she didn't sign up to be like your like soundboard for all of your trauma, all the immature males in this movie.
Right.
But I think it's also interesting and challenging because obviously Max reminds her of her husband. I feel like they
Right.
probably were similar like to when he was a student there at Rushmore. And I imagine that probably made this whole entire situation more challenging because he reminds her of him. And yes, with her not handling everything the best, when you have Max showing up on like outside your window, um, I would not have believed him for a second.
Yeah, maybe don't let him
Surely
in.
not in an
Yeah.
accident.
What I was gonna say, going off what you're saying there, Shane, is
Yeah.
that what kind of her deal is almost that she likes. There's a, sort of a part of her that sort of likes the attention. There's something about having someone not lust, but like just be enamored with you in a certain way. And that's something that she's been missing since the loss of her husband. So
Hmm.
that's kind of, goes at the theme of a bunch of lonely people looking for connection. And if that's not just the theme of every Wes Anderson movie, but it really works, I think, and kind of explains some of maybe her more questionable choices throughout the movie.
Well, yeah, and even from the scene where Herman shows up at her front door, the carrots, where she's just like, "You want a carrot?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"Sure." It's like so awkward and weird, but like, does
But
Rosemary
nice.
really
Yeah.
like Herman, or does Rosemary like the fact that like Herman's showing interest in
Right.
her? And very much to the point, Robert. Yes, every Wes Anderson movie is about lonely people trying to find connection, but like this one in particular,
Hmm.
like the all the main three players in this are really not handling those things in a mature way or trying to navigate things in a healthy way. And it's a nice journey seeing in this film when they finally like reach a point where they're all handling things okay. Because, like, Rosemary has a guy named Luke Wilson, um, which I just love Luke Wilson popping up in things and being like the most. That's a guy.
Yeah.
He's like he's a guy, and he does that very well. And
These are my
the,
OR scrubs. Oh, are they?
I have never seen Scrubs before. Thank you for explaining to me. But like even like Seymour Cassell, I love him as Bert, Max's dad, because he's also like his wife died, and he's honestly taking life in stride as like the best he can as a mature man who deals with his feelings in a healthy way, and honestly is trying to be supportive and for his son, and just doing his barber work. um it's so interesting because have any of you ever felt like kinship to Max as a character, like when you were in high school and stuff like that?
I mean, I can relate to how he's feeling in some ways. Not that I've ever acted out in the way he did, but having a little crush on a teacher or something that's relatable. It was almost like he was acting at a fantasy that a teenage boy would have.
Anybody else like involved in 50 million different activities in high school or college?
I was like the opposite, so no.
Yeah, me too. Opposite.
Which I have like that montage at the beginning, like the yearbook sequence is just
Yeah.
that's some peak Wes Anderson filmmaking right there.
It's one
And
of
just
my
like
favorite montages maybe I've seen in a movie.
mm,
It's so engaging and it immediately gets you into the like propulsive nature of what you're about to experience. Sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to do that.
oh no,
It would have
and
been a shame if
that's
that was cut, like you said, Shane.
yeah, because Disney's like, that's too many setups. So like they basically on the fly on any given day were like, we could shoot this one real quick when we have
Hmm.
this all set up already. So that was their solution, Wes Anderson's solution to get that sequence of the film made. And because like yes, they were on a very tight budget, and Disney's like, no, you're not going to waste our money, despite the fact that Disney wastes money all the time now, like a lot of money. Can you imagine Disney just being like, "How dare you try to spend any extra money over the $10 million we gave you?" When they just crap out $300 million movies now. Just, but that's a side note. Um, but there's definitely this isn't the most stylized Wes Anderson film, but it has all of like you see those hallmarks of what's going to be
Yeah.
consistent in Wes Anderson films, and then you also have I think Kevin, you mentioned that he was getting up to some mischief. What's the line between doing pranks and attempted murder?
Oh, yeah, cutting someone's brakes is
Yeah.
definitely attempted murder.
That's crossed the line. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the
Which like
tree almost falling on and crushing somebody. That's pretty
Yeah.
close too.
just like the two of them going at each other, and like like Max is like a weird kid. Like that whole rooftop meeting that he set up with Herman's wife. It's like, you want a sandwich? Oh,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, what the hell's going on here? And he weaponized bees. What a little jerk. Those bees were just living their life, and it's just like, no, you're gonna attack Bill Murray. Um, but I guess like Robert, do you have anything else that really stood out to you about Rushmore that you wanted to add?
We were talking about, well, two things. One, real quick, just based off of like the visual hallmarks. He's using really wide lenses in this movie.
Mm,
Um, and he's just fitting so much in there. You're talking about like all the setups. We're just seeing all of the stuff that's going on at the school. And even at what is it? Grover Cleveland is the other one that he
yeah.
goes to. Yeah. So that's cool. And but going back to Max's dad for a second, Max repeatedly mentions that his dad is like a brain surgeon and that's why he's not around. Like you mentioned, he's a little jerk, and there's maybe a good Macaulay Culkin reference with Home Alone. But
Mhm.
I, it's interesting the way that he is just so passively aggressively mean to his dad when his dad's not around, but is like in his presence, really kind and sweet to him. Um, And it takes a lot for him to introduce people like Bill Murray to his dad. And it takes a lot of growth, and it's notable that it doesn't happen until the end. So it's interesting to see just how it all plays out like that.
Well, and I do feel like that's such a big part of Max's character that it's all about that class issue. And like he's very insecure about where he comes
Yeah.
from. Because like he's not the kind of kid that can afford to go to Rushmore on his own. And it's
He
like
wrote a
he
good
has to
essay in third grade or something.
and he has
Right.
to
A play. Yeah, he wrote a play.
Oh, a play. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
yeah, like he ideally is the kind of kid who has to work his ass off
Hmm.
and get the high grades and stuff like that. And but he chooses to get involved in literally everything else besides doing his schoolwork. And then also fun fact, the Rushmore is filmed at the boarding school that Owen Wilson went to,
Hmm.
and it's right across the street from the high school. Oh, I stole Nash's thunder, and I'm sorry.
Fine.
What high school?
And the high school that he winds up having to go to,
Yeah, yeah.
and they had to like. This is gonna sound
Oh,
terrible, but
gotcha.
this is what
And
Wes Anderson said. Like they made it look more like this was in the inner city than it
mm,
actually is, because like they're literally right next to each other,
I
which is
see what
very
you mean.
interesting.
Yeah.
But how about you, Nash? Was there anything else that stood out to you that you wanted to bring up?
I'm sorry. I have to go back a little bit. I think I'm going to be
Yeah.
the one contrarian a little bit.
Uh-oh.
I think the Rosemary stuff with me is the stuff that stuck with me a little bit as um you could tell that it was two young men writing a story because it kind of feels like and it works within the context of the story of she's kind of being lusted after, but she's very much it feels like treated we're going to use objectified, but I don't think that it's as awful as that. I'm just saying that she's like an object to be won from these two men, from these two young man and older man trying to go get her. And then by the end of the movie, I feel like she's still there. Like we are told that she and Herman are going to, well, I mean, it looks like they're going to kind of grow something together. And then she still has this emotional connection with Max. And it kind of feels like she's like, maybe not manipulated, but I didn't really pick up on the depth of her character as much as it sounds like you guys are. Like, obviously, there's elements, like, she is an engaging character. I like watching her on screen. Like, that's amazing. But I think those elements of, and it could have been intentional. Like this is one of those things where it's like they're writing about their experiences of being younger, or Owen Wilson of being a younger man lusting after a older teacher. Um, and this is kind of this like hyper realized situation where they're putting this relationship on screen. Um, but I don't know. That was the one element of where she ends up in this movie doesn't like it doesn't feel like an arc for herself. It feels like an arc for the other two, kind of, which is fine. Um, because the movie, I guess, isn't she's not really the main character. The other two are, but I don't know. That was going to be my one like only kind of gripe. It's not really even a gripe. It's just that was what I was getting hung up on a little bit, and that was like the '90s element of oh,
Hmm.
this female character doesn't seem like she's written with a good degree of depth. She's just like, oh, her husband passed away, and now she's the object of romantic attraction of these two men who are the kind of two sides of the same coin in terms of immaturity and how they approach life. Sorry. Okay.
Now, I think that's a really good point. I had similar thoughts. I personally think it was intentional just
Probably.
because it's mostly told from Max's perspective. Um, but yeah, I was a little I don't know, not really confused, but I was left wondering at the ending of the movie. Um, but then I was thinking about it a little bit, and at least the way the movie ends, that the final scene at the school after the play,
Mhm.
it's kind of like just that night, in my opinion, like I don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Hmm.
Maybe she never sees them again. I didn't get that impression. But yeah, I wonder how much was intentional.
I
So
definitely had the first because like I've probably watched this movie 5 times, I think, at this point. I definitely had a lot of conflicting feelings the first couple of times that I watched this movie. And I don't know if it's like I've gotten so used to Wes Anderson at this point that
Mhm.
now I've watched this movie so many times. I feel like when we get to that ending of the film, it, at least to me in my experience with the film, it feels like all of them have kind of moved forward in a place where it's like they can be in a normal place. I am certainly not going to argue with you that this doesn't feel like two young men writing this script
yeah,
because,
Yeah. Look, I
like,
mean, it is, right?
yeah, and
yeah. I hope they move forward because otherwise the implications are a little weird to me.
yeah, well, and I think the challenge is because like this film literally is about a teenage boy and a middle-aged man trying to win a prize, which is a woman whose husband died and is emotionally trying to process that. So like when you take a step back and really think about it, I'm like, that sounds really bad. But you know, I feel like a lot of Wes Anderson films, if you take a step back and think about like, I'm gonna have a lot of thought. It's gonna be an interesting conversation for Life
Sure.
Aquatic because I
Sure.
feel like that's probably his most morally gray movie because it's like I Steve Zissou's probably his most his least redeemable main character and trying to process that. But I think what helps here is like Max is a teenage boy
Yeah.
and like he
Right.
is going to have to grow up. And like getting to see him get to that point at the end where like they could have a reasonable moment together that like together and celebrating and stuff like that. And you know, I definitely see where you're coming from, Nash, and I'm not
I,
going to
I
argue against you that
yeah, and
there's
I think a
something.
I think a
Go
big
ahead.
part of it was just like her. It was crazy that she kept talking to these people. She kept going to these shows. I was like, these two guys are insane, and they have continually showed how nuts they are,
Yeah.
and like what they're deciding to do to try to get you. And then she just kept coming back, and I was like, "Girl, what are you doing? Like, what are you?" And that was where I was like, "Okay, this is a fantasy of two two boys, which is fine, totally."
Right. So that's kind of my thing with it is that I think it's very obvious, like you said at the beginning, that it's written by two 20-something guys, but I don't know if that's like inherently a negative thing about the
No,
movie because it definitely has a perspective, you know what I mean? And the two guys grow and learn from objectifying her. Like the movie itself isn't objectifying her. Um, it,
yeah,
not like physically or the way that the characters
Mhm.
are. It's turning her into like an object to stimulate growth, character growth for Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman. But I that's just like a fairly shallow woman character, but also it's that's at service of male characters. But like again, that's what the perspective of the movie is because um I'm surprised that hasn't come up yet. But Licorice Pizza to me is it's similar in terms of the Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman characters, an adult in the Alana Haim trying to act young and a young person in Cooper Hoffman trying to act old. The ages are wider here, but it's the same thing with Schwartzman and Murray. And by the end, they're each kind of back to where they should be, or at least closer to where they should be. And that's thanks in part to the way that they realize they've been treating the Olivia Williams character the whole movie,
that's true.
and by extension, the way that been treating each other, and then been treating themselves and just like just the way that they've been acting, you know. So I completely think it's fair to just be like, yeah, this is two dudes who wrote this woman, and this isn't like some deep piece of feminist literature, but at the same time, it's not trying to be.
Totally. And yeah, and I think all those to be true.
Yeah.
I'm the only person that said anything negative. I want to say some really positive things. Um,
That's a fair
I'm
point, though.
I'm really excited to rewatch this movie. It's one of those movies that, like Robert pointed out, the wide angle element where there's so much in on screen at any given moment. I'm so excited to watch it again, to catch the like visual gags, to catch the quick rapid fire jokes that are just being spit out. Um, I it's just it begs rewatch and I paused a couple times because I was laughing so hard, but I wanted to like catch what was being said and like where we were going next because um, it just moves and it's consistently very funny and like Max is one of the funniest characters that I've seen in a movie recently, like in the past few months. Like he's genuinely hilarious, and so much of that is tied to Jason, but just incredibly written dialogue. I just wanted to throw that out there. Oh,
Have you
also,
seen Queer, by the way?
I haven't. No.
Just because Jason Schwartzman is one of the most hilarious characters that I've seen in the last couple months in that movie.
Okay. He's also hilarious in Between Two Temples in a different way.
It's true.
Um, yeah.
Such a
So
good canter.
so also I was kind of blown away, and I'm not usually a score guy, but the score in this movie and the soundtrack is
Mm.
great. It like really moves you through the once again like they picked really great songs to marry with the story that they're trying to tell, and it just blends perfectly. I
That final dance.
is picture perfect.
Yo. And Mark Mothersbaugh
Hmm.
really knows how to make a Wes Anderson score.
The legend.
Whip it. Whip it good. Because Debo. Um, it's interesting because like we haven't brought up a couple other characters like Dirk, his best friend, which also obviously Max has some interesting feelings for older women as he makes up this fake story about hand jobs with Dirk's mom. Which, and I think it's important to realize too, it's like it's not just the relate, it's literally all of Max's relationships he needs to learn how to mature with because he's
Yeah.
not a good friend to Dirk. He's antagonistic with Magnus, who's also antagonistic with him. And like Margaret's like a cool girl, age appropriate, and she's right there showing interest. And he's just like oblivious. And that's a nice little relationship. And also he his dynamic with Dr. Guggenheim, Brian
Hmm.
Cox's character, which I feel so bad for that character. All the shit
Yeah.
that he goes through in this movie.
I love the scene in the hospital where his eyes keep popping open whenever Max talks. It was like a lot of moments in this movie were like a sitcom at times.
It's just like it has some good comedic timing, and like it's like he can like sense his presence. It's just one of those old school kind of. It's a Seinfeld Newman relationship where it's just like they just antagonize each other so deeply and so
I don't remember
viscerally.
what the line exactly is, but like when Brian Cox returns what Jason Schwartzman says with like a mocking tone, it's just like really funny to see when he's like, just it's just really funny to see that from Brian Cox, and I love it's make my favorite moment in the movie.
I didn't know he was in it, and so I was like, "Oh yes, here we go."
Underappreciated comedic actor because he has some legitimately funny roles in like Super Troopers. Oh my god, Lava, and just this whole cast really works too. And wait a minute, I just realized Connie Nielsen's in this movie. I didn't realize that she was Dirk's mom.
It took me a minute to
Oh,
realize that too, yeah.
Well, look at that. And then I I love the early Wes Anderson movies where you get Andrew Wilson
I was
popping
just
up
about to
too,
say Andrew Wilson.
where it's just like, who's this other person talks? Oh my God, that's a Wilson brother because they all have the same voice.
that was a Scottish guy?
He's Coach Beck.
No, yeah.
Wait, Robert, you didn't know the Wilson brothers are all Scottish?
Yeah, I was about to try to do one, then I just said I better not.
Magnus was the Scottish kid, right?
Yeah, which he channeled his energies too, and maybe Magnus grew up to be a really talented actor too.
Hmm.
Maybe award winning. Maybe one day he won a Film Independent Spirit Award. So there you go.
Did he?
Who
I mean, he was
Magnus the
probably he may
character?
have
I
been
don't know.
based on a real
Oh, you meant
character.
the
Oh, the
character. I thought you
character.
meant the
Yeah.
actor. Sorry.
I don't think I know the actor.
Yeah.
Stephen McCall, who his top four is Vigil, Rushmore, The Wee Man, and Rise of the Foot Soldier.
Okay.
So there you go.
That's also coincidentally my top four on Letterboxd.
How is The Wee Man? I've always wanted to check that out, Robert.
You're gonna have to find out for yourself, Shane. I don't want to spoil it for you.
Are we going to see the Wee Man on an episode of Also See?
Honestly, we could.
I gotta hold
How
you to
is that
that.
even spelled? The Wee Man? W-E?
WEE.
The
It's
Wee Man.
Just a
what I
little
call my
man.
nephews. I call them the Wee Men
Literally
because
have never heard of any of these
they're
people.
not quite men yet, but they're so damn big now. Uh, the True Life of Paul Ferris. This is a 2013 film. Never heard of it, but Magnus was in it, and
All
it's in
right.
his top four on IMDb. So there you go. But any final thoughts on Rushmore?
Just real quick, I just wanted to touch back on the point you guys were all making about how the characters are lonely. I like how they kind of showed that visually and referred back to it with the references to drowning throughout the movie. Because we've got Rosemary's husband, who we find out at the end of the movie died by drowning. And in the beginning of the movie, we have this little scene with Bill Murray at the pool with his
Hmm.
family while his wife is flirting with some dude in the
Yeah.
back. And he literally cannonballs in to drown himself out of that scenario. So I thought that was an interesting callback.
Mhm. Also, quick side note: did Mrs. Bloom cheat on him?
It seems sort of
Unconfirmed.
clear, but yeah.
I
I
feel
like
like
their
she did.
family portrait, by the way. The face that he's making in that family portrait is hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Also, how he gets beat up by his sons.
I know.
Oh, just wild. The Bloom family is an interesting dynamic for sure. But those were a lot of thoughts on Rushmore, and hopefully you all enjoyed them. But as we wrap up the show, we're going to do some quick recommendations. So let's go around the horn here. So, Kevin, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
If it's just anything, I'm going to go with Night of the Living Dead. Old movie, of course, but I just saw it for the first time recently, and I loved it. I recommend everybody go check that out. It was a nice little social commentary and nice little piece of horror from the 60s.
Yep. They're coming for you, Barbara.
Yeah, a classic, of course.
I sang
And
a
before,
song from
Finally
that in
got to
choir
it.
in high school.
oh, did
Huh.
you?
Yeah.
Before you go see 28 Years Later, go back to the OG zombie movie that started
Yeah.
it all. So there you go. How about you, Nash?
I caught a 2024 release called Number 24 from 2024. It's a Norwegian film. It's a kind of a war film from World War II, about World War II, about the most decorated Norwegian citizen in the history of the country, and his escapades to he committed like or not committed he led like 20 sabotage attempts against Nazi occupied Norway, and it's engaging and interesting, and um, I it's not the greatest movie of all time, but we love a little like
We love to see Nazis getting taken out in 2025.
Hell yeah.
yeah, I needed a little bit of that.
And it looks like it's on Netflix. So there you
It
go.
is. It's on Netflix. It's very accessible.
There you go. How about you, Robert?
I watched the movie, I don't know if you've heard of the Fabelmans for the second time in about 2 months. Um, maybe 3 months, but uh I hadn't seen it since it came out when I watched it a couple months ago, and I just kept thinking about it when I after my rewatch, and I was like, I gotta see this again. When I first saw it, I had it at 4 stars. I bumped it up to 4.5, and now it's at 5. Um, I don't know. This is just it's Steven Spielberg that so like it's not a surprise that it's great, but for some reason, unlike most of his other movies, I can just like sit in it and kind of bask in what it's doing the whole time. It's one of his more moving movies to me, and that could easily be because it's his most personal, or most like directly personal. Um, I don't know. I could talk about it for a long time. I'll just mention though after my first and second viewings, I was still kind of bumping against the parent performances, but the third time, they really didn't bother me at all. In fact, I sort of really liked them, especially the Paul Dano performance, which I now think is kind of incredible. There are just so many little moments where he's off to the side in the frame, or where he's like even in the center of the frame, like the focus of the shot, but he's just left out of what's going on. And you just feel so much for that guy, um, because of he just has a lot of love to give, just doesn't know how to give it the right way, like for the way that the people in his life need it. And Paul Dano just plays that so well. So I'm almost recommending his performance as much as I am the movie as a whole because um, for some reason the last time I watched it, his performance kind of unlocked the entire movie for me.
I absolutely love the Fabelmans and watched it again sometime last year, and it still really resonated with me. And I remember having some really good conversations with friend of the show, Foster, also contributor to SiftPop. It's a special film, but I do have to blame it for my John Ford series. Because my wife and I happened to leave the screening of the Fabelmans, and when I was going to randomly select a director, Jess is like, wouldn't that be funny if it was John Ford? And it literally was. There's 264 directors. The Fablemans and my wife put that in the universe. So thank you. But the most important thing is, where's the horizon?
If
Which
it's in the middle, it's boring as shit.
can get out of my office.
Yeah.
As I'm sitting here with directed
Uh,
by John Ford, because I borrowed that from Kevin, you know Griff, friend of the show, and also was on like the most episodes of my John Ford series. Let me that documentary, which is very interesting from Peter Bogdanovich, but not one of my recommendations. So I always do three. One new film I'd like to throw out there because nobody seems to be seeing it. Since I know Robert saw it, is Better Man.
mm.
Um, I have Robbie Williams music stuck in my head now, and this is a thoroughly entertaining and wild movie. Um, and I've probably listened to DJ Rock way too many times since I watched this movie. And let me entertain you. Those two in particular. One film off my watch list I watched was Django, as in the Franco Nero original Django film, which did indeed have the theme song Django that Quentin Tarantino used at the beginning
Mm.
of Django Unchained. So, which
Django.
Django. And this is actually yet another illegal ripoff of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, because this director's like, we're gonna ride high off of Fistful of Dollars, which came out like 4 years before this movie. Um, and they even Franco Nero was dressed like the man with no name, and the voice actor they had dubbing over him sounded like Clint Eastwood. I'm just like, this is highway robbery, but it was fun. So I'm going to recommend it. And then one film that I rewatched of my movies here was Hellboy 2 The Golden Army. I love the Hellboy movies. And honestly, this sequel is one of the most creative and fun movies that I've, comic book movies, with just how much Guillermo del Toro just went headlong into all the character designs and everything. Had some really fun action and everything. I kind of was getting in the mood because I'll soon be going on the franchise Paradiso episodes, but found out that they're not including me on the sequel one now, so I can't get in a fight with Heath about how much he doesn't like Hellboy. So anyway, but that's a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland. But I would like to thank Kevin, Nash, and Robert. Thank you all so much for coming on and talking about movies with me.
Thank
Of
you.
course.
Thank you.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.